Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to Jesse's Occupational Awareness channel. Today we're going to be continuing on with the TDCJ War Stories series. Sorry about the lighting in here. It's a little bit dark, but we're not too worried about what I look like. We're going to worry about the content that I have to put out for you guys. Today, our title is Locked in Close Quarters with a Murderer. Dun, 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 dun. Yeah. A little more dramatic than it actually is sounding there. So, I'll give you guys a little backstory, paint a picture, and lead up into the topics. One of the classes that we had in the academy that was extremely brushed over was inmate/offender classification. Classification is where the offender is examined, what's the other word? Investigated. They look into all the crimes that they had been convicted of in the free world, conduct that they had done within the system, and this determined where they were going to be housed, what unit they were going to go to, what kind of jobs they could be assigned, what their security threat level was, and so forth and so forth. And there were many different factors for it. I didn't pay a whole lot of attention during that class. I was just kind of ready to get done for the day. I do remember at the end of it, our instructor, Sergeant Charles Battles, mentioning when and if you ever have to go out on transport, you're going to have a travel card. Travel card is the file and folder that the offender has, and it lists all their information, race, age, where they're from, what unit they're assigned to, and it has the crimes that they were convicted of in the free world, as well as anything that had happened within the system, written down on this. He told us sometimes these transports can be long, 2-hour drive or so. Texas is a pretty big state. No matter how bored you get, don't read these travel cards. You don't want to know the crimes that these guys have been convicted of. Some of them are pretty gruesome. It's going to change your perspective of the offender. You need to see them just as an individual dressed in white, going on about their business. Don't read those travel cards. Yeah, whatever. Thanks, Sarge. Just kind of brush that off. Well, sorry, we got a fly buzzing around. Well, let's fast forward to a couple of months working at the Styles. I'm on OJT, and there was an officer, I want to say her title was the Disaster Management Control, something of that nature. The position was anytime something at the facility was broken, a lock mechanism was out, a phone didn't work, a light was busted out, plumbing problem, there was a form that a CO could fill out, submit to the supervisor. Supervisor would pass it on from there, and it would go to this officer. And she had an offender who worked with her who would punch it into a computer, and this is what would dispatch the maintenance supervisors with their workers to get the discrepancies fixed. Well, the unit was shorthanded one day, as Styles and many other units typically are. She needed to go out on offender transport. The job still had to get done, so when we had mustered up for our OJT assignments that morning and where we were going to be assigned to, Officer Lewis had assigned everybody else out, and I was left alone. I was the last one to get an assignment. And she said, "Hey, Carter, we need you to go over to the disaster management office and watch our inmate for her. She needs to go out on transport for today." Roger that, Miss Lewis. I'll take care of it. I knew where it was because as part of our unit tours, we'd gone to that office, we had met with her, fine. Well, I'm thinking she's going to be there to tell me what's going on. So I make my way over to it, and it was a building. The first room was an office that she had set aside for her, and it was a small office. I'm talking barely enough room for the desk that she sat in, the little desk that the offender sat at. It was about the size of a TV tray, and it had an old school computer on it with the old keyboard, clack, 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 making the loud keyboard noises. Nothing modern about it at all. You couldn't touch the walls by stretching your arms out, but you could get pretty close to it, meaning very tight quarters. It was surrounded by a fence with the gate that would open up. The Turnout Boss which was the officer that stood outside on the walkway that controlled offender movement once they had gotten out of their buildings and were going to wherever. This individual had the key to that. So I make my way over, and the offender's standing outside the fence. And he didn't know me, I didn't know him. Walked up to him. I don't remember what her name was. We'll just call her Janice. I said, "Hey, where's Officer Janice?" "Oh, she went out on transport, boss." "Oh, okay. Well, I'm here to stand in for her." "Oh, all right. Well, let's get going." That being the offender. So I looked over at the Turnout Boss. Told him, "Hey, I'm filling in for Officer Janice today." He didn't say anything. Walked over, opened the gate. We go in, and offender pushes the door open, flips the light switch. We go in, sit down, and I had no idea what to do. There were no instructions anywhere. The desk was just a plain desk. There was a radio kind of behind us on a shelf. I sat down in the chair. The offender sits down, and he's facing away from me. So I'm staring at the back of his head. We're probably 6 feet apart from each other, and he goes on to do his thing, and I'm just sitting there at this desk. All right. An hour goes by, still staring at the back of his head. 2 hours goes by. 3 hours goes by. Nothing. Nobody ever came in. Nobody ever checked on us. I didn't have a radio, meaning to call somebody else. Nothing. And after about the third hour, the inmate, he's still banging away on his computer. He kind of looks back, doesn't make eye contact with me. "Kind of a slow day, huh, boss?" I said, "Yeah, man, it really is." I didn't want to say too much to the guy because they taught us in the academy, and me still being boot ass, not knowing anything, not to talk to offenders, don't let them manipulate you, nothing. So I really didn't want to say anything to this guy. By the fourth hour, I said, "Hey, it's usually time that we go to chow here, boss. You ready to take a break?" I said, "Yeah, we can do that." So he gets up, goes outside the door. I go to chow, come back. A couple hours later, he finishes up for the day, gets up, says it's time for him to go back to his building. Okay. He leaves. I follow him out, go back to Officer Lewis. Told her we're done for the day. All right, there's the end of that day. The second day comes in, do the same thing. She's out on transport. I'm working with this guy. Pretty much the same affairs. We talked a little bit more because, let's face it, it was just getting boring. And I was kind of getting a little bit comfortable. I didn't think anything about the guy. Cool. Third day came up. Now at this point, got the radio turned on, listening to the local radio station. He's doing his thing. We're not talking personal about each other, but we're talking about TDCJ. He's been at Styles for the last 10 years. Okay, cool. How does he like it? What's prison? How do I like the job? I was prior military. It's a good job. Looking forward to climbing the ranks. I talked to him a little bit more than I should have, but at the time I didn't know any better. So this is where we're getting into the topic. I didn't really think there was anything wrong with the guy. He came out friendly. He was a short little dude. Little guy, glasses, kind of reddish hair. I'm not going to say his name. So when I went home that night, I got to thinking, man, what the hell did this guy do that landed him in TDCJ? So I got on the computer, I typed his name in, and I did versus the state of Texas. And it came up with his court trial. You can usually search in a .gov or a .court, any kind of court documents. They're public information. And it had the guy's information and the crime that he had committed. Without going into too much detail, when he was still a minor, him and two other individuals broke into a house, committed burglary. The homeowner was home at the time. They stabbed him multiple times. When I say multiple, the document listed over 100. Stole as much as they could in the house. Now at this point, we've committed burglary. Now we've committed murder. Stole as much as they could from the house and left. He was caught a couple of days later, tried, convicted, Even though he was a minor, he was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. Even though he was a minor, it was because the court had listed the crime was so heinous due to the violent nature of what had happened to the victim, he would never be released from prison. I don't remember what year it was that he had been sentenced, but he had been in there since he was a minor. And it was the time around that I was still a teenager. So the dude was still, he was pretty close to my age at this point. At this point, I'm going, holy shit. This is the guy I'm basically locked in a room in 6 feet away from. There's no telling what all he's done in here. And this is the guy that the unit trusts to enter in the maintenance files to get stuff fixed. So if that's the crime he committed, and that's what he's allowed to do around the penitentiary, what have all the other guys done around here? When I went into work the next day, I couldn't look at offenders the same. At the time, for the few, at this point it was about a week and a half or so, they just looked like dudes in white. Old dudes, middle-aged dudes, just offenders. Now I'm thinking, what in the world have these guys done to get in there? That goes back to the first topic where I talked about Sergeant Battles saying, don't read the travel cards. That's basically what I had done by looking up this guy's information and seeing what he had done. I'm not going to say I was scared, kind of, but I definitely had a newfound respect for the individual that I was with, and I wasn't comfortable anymore. By the third day, I remember I actually kind of started getting sleepy and kind of started nodding off a little bit just because of the boredom in the room. I worked with him one more day. This would have been our fourth day, and I said nothing. Guy kind of tried to talk to me. I made a comment like, let's just go ahead and focus on the work, man. I got some other things I got to take care of today. He clammed up after that, went back to doing what he was doing. Thankfully, by the fifth day, Officer Janice wasn't needed on transport anymore, and she was back in with that. I never told anybody about the penitentiary about doing that, but I do know that it did change my perspective. I saw inmates and was curious about what they had done from there. Nothing happened between me and the guy. We didn't fight each other, nothing like that. However, if anything would have broke down and happened, it would have happened in that small little ass room with a guy who had no problem murdering a human being at some point. He probably didn't care anything about me. There's no telling what could have happened in there. I probably could have had control of him, but I would have had no way to get any kind of backup or help. I didn't have a radio. Only a few people knew I was in there. Miss Lewis, the Turnout Boss, nobody else knew. So if a fight would have broke out and he would have gotten the advantage of me, that would have been it. I could have easily been killed. Now, if I'd have got the advantage of him, great. I'm not going to say that I didn't know how to take care of myself, but likewise, you don't know what kind of self-defense these inmates have. They train all day in the penitentiary and they can learn some pretty deadly stuff. I didn't know this guy. There's no telling what he could have been capable of. So that's one of the things that a CO can deal with, and very early on in the career. So it definitely opened my eyes to who these guys are. I didn't see him for a long time after that. I got assigned to SEG, and I don't know if that position got eliminated or changed or not. The next time I saw him, he was in SEG, he was pushing a cart, and they were going to paint the walls. And I remember him looking up at me. I looked down at him. I was in the picket. I looked up at him. I looked down at him. And I kind of nodded my head like that. He shot me the finger, not very openly. Just kind of shot me the finger like that. Kept pushing his cart going on. Let me know right then and there, we weren't buddies. Not that inmates and offenders ever are, but just because you think you might have a working relationship with an individual, man, no. Well, okay, if I thought there was one decent dude in here, there's not. So, yeah, that was my experience with that one. I left out a lot of pertinent information because I don't want anybody to go and try to look up this individual to see and read. Moral of this story for COs that are working or ones that are planning on a career: don't look up information on these guys. Keep them anonymous and just go on and do your thing, man. It can be some bad stuff. I really appreciate y'all taking the time to watch this. Look forward to seeing everybody in the next video. Y'all take care of yourselves.